All right, Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and welcome to our afternoon study. We are in the book of Exodus. We have made it all the way to chapter 16. Man, as we look at the Israelites, please see yourselves. These things were written aforetime for our learning. And, if we don't see it in any other chapter, we have to parallel our lives to the thoughts, feelings, actions, sayings, doings of the Israelites here. Coming in out of chapter 15, they started to whine, they started to murmur, they started to complain. And we see Moshe throw the tree in the water to make it sweet. And this is obviously not the last time the Israelites complain, murmur, and this is on the heels of, just as we'll read, just a month ago, they were delivered from Egypt. We'll look at how even in our lives, right after a victory, Abimelech steps in. So let's continue to look at this as we look at the bread of heaven in chapter 16. So there's 36 verses. We're going to do 6 verses at a time. And for the newcomers, how we do it is whoever reads has the first opportunity to speak on what they see in the verses they read, and then we have a full discussion about the passage that we just read. So the first 6 verses, who would like to lead off?
I will if nobody else does.
All right, go ahead, brother.
And they took their journey from Elim, and all the assembly of the children of Yasharal came until the wilderness of Sain, which is between Elim and Sain, on the 15th day of the 2nd month after their departing out of the land of Mitzrayim. And the whole assembly of the children of Yasharal murmured against Moshe and Aaron in the wilderness. And the children of Yasharal said unto them, would to Elohim we had died by the hand of Yahuwah in the land of Mitzrayim, when we sat by the flesh pots and when we did eat bread to the full. For ye have brought us forth into the wilderness to kill a leftav, this whole assembly with hunger. Then Yahuwah said unto Moshe, behold, I will rain bread from the Shemayim for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain rate every day, that I may prove them whether they will walk in my torah or no. And it shall come to pass that on the 6th day they shall prepare a leftav, that which they bring in, and it shall be twice as much as they gather daily. And Moshe and Aaron said unto the children of Yasharal, at evening, then you shall know that Yahuwah has brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim. Well, he's delivered them already out. Now they're worried about hunger. It's kind of what we talked about earlier in our lesson today, about being fearful, about creating something that's not really there, not trusting him. That's interesting. How they thought that he's going to deliver them out just to kill them. Now that really shows their lack of faith there. So that's interesting how he has to now prove himself that he is going to do what he said he would do. That he would give them, and he would tell them how much they got to gather each day, and that they got to get double on the preparation day before Shabbat, so they can just rest. They don't have to worry about that. He got them. And for them to see, he's delivering them out of the Shemayim, and they can't deny it, that it's him that's brought them out as he has promised. He's keeping his covenant, as we see these leftovers scattered through here as usual. They always point us in some pretty interesting directions. So, you know, I can't wait to see how this plays out as we continue to dissect it. But it's, you know, the parallels of what we heard this morning, like you said, I can see why you're excited now. I can start to see it unfolding here, you know. These unfounded fears, you know, that we tend to create in ourselves because we really trust him at that point? And no wonder we need to study the word so that we can, you know, have that faith when he takes us out of our Mitzrayim. You know, we better be able to trust him. He's going to be able to rain down the manna for us too, or the quail or whatever else, you know. But that's kind of what I see at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. You know, specifically when, you know, that's why I made it a point to point out this morning about the realities that these things are real, and the distinction between how we lose our focus on him, and then those things become even bigger and bigger and bigger and huge. Because, you know, as Micah brought out earlier, Peter does see raging waters. You know, you know, there was a fear in crossing the Red Sea, in that there are sharks in that water. You know, but he's protecting those who have their focus on him. Although there's a real thing, there's real sharks, and they are going to swallow up the Egyptians. So these things happen, these things exist, and we have to be mindful that our focus has to always be on him, and we lose our focus when we're not in his word. I'm gonna let Sister Robbie go. Go ahead, sis.
I just was going to read when you're ready for another reader.
Okay, yeah, we're not. We got a lot to cover in these first 6 verses.
Okay. I mean, when you get there.
I got you, sis. You read next.
Okay.
Praise God. Brother Will.
Shalom. Yeah. Verse 6 really strikes home for me. I'm sorry. Verse 3 really strikes home for me. Because as I read here real quick, and it says, and the sons of Yasharal said to them, we wish that we had died by the land of Yah, in the land of Egypt, where we sat by the meat pots, where we ate our fill of bread, for you have brought us into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. This reminds me of human nature.
It is.
This reminds me of when we take our faith and our focus away from what he may be working in our life on, that he may be allowing things to happen in our life because he's trying to build us up to the next level. This I'm seeing as a test of faith, this verse. And they were complaining. And they're actually going as far as wishing that they had died. And then they're bringing up that they sat in the land of Egypt and they had the pots of meat. So they're like saying, we had it so good, but why are you taking this from us? Now you're bringing us here to die. And it's this human nature battle of when we go through trials and tribulations, that we are not to take this attitude and this mindset, and we are to remain focused on the journey that he has for us and just hold on to that road. So verse 3 really reminds me of the things that we go through in life that we do not understand. And it also reminds me that we are to maintain that journey, even if we do not understand fully what it is. We are not to get into this mindset of complaining that, wait a minute, you baruched me in the past, and now you're taking it away. So I just wanted to share that, that's what sticks out to me the most out of these 6 verses right now. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, nah, that's good, brother. I thought you were going to go another direction with verse 3 because I think everything you said was on point. But also part of that is literally how soon we forget. Like we, just like the Israelites, we have selective memory about our past. You know what I mean? They have selective memory. They mentioned the pots and the meat, and chilling. They didn't mention the slavery. They didn't mention being whipped. They didn't mention being controlled at every whim of motion that they had, or being allowed to be free to go eat at a certain point. They were under bondage, completely in bondage. They forget that part, and it's like, you come into the faith and knowledge and saving grace of Yahusha Messiah. You start following Torah, and then, after a while, things may get a little stale for you. So you start thinking about the good old days, so to speak. When you would get off work on Friday and run home and change your clothes and run out and drink the bar dry, throw up on the way home, fall asleep, wake up with a hangover, just to get yourself together in time for Monday work and then start over again on Friday again. You know what I mean? Yeah, that was great, wasn't it? You know what I mean? So we have selective memories about those things. Waking up with a strange person in your bed because you didn't know that you went there with them last night, and sneaking out. So and then you want to go through that again. So all of these things, the pain that, not the euphoria feeling from the drugs, but the pain you went through while you were on drugs. You forget that part. The Israelites are no different here. We're no different from them. How soon we forget the miraculous things Yahuwah does to get us out of those things. He just delivered them a month
That's
ago.
right.
Well, so this is exactly right, that they are human emotions, human sensibilities. They have completely forgotten, and they're talking about they would have had it better.
You think at this time in this day and hour it would be more whinier than that one? Because we got a pretty whiny civilization right now. We got a pretty good, especially here in America. Can you imagine if we had to be delivered out of our comforts of our homes and our lives and stuff to have to go? It would be like I can almost see it the same thing. We'd be like, whoa, wait a minute, I just had all of that over here, and now I don't even got food. I got to trust you to deliver this to me. I can almost hear now this entitled generation be like, wow, come on.
Yeah.
I can see that. Would it be worse now or that? I don't know. That's interesting.
Right, and even on the heels of them coming out of the Red Sea, watching, like we said earlier, the Egyptians get swallowed up of a dry path. He parted the water, then dried, made hard the way so they could walk through, and then watched it swallow the Egyptians up, and now they're crying and whining because they're concerned and worried. So good stuff, brother.
Yeah,
you would add something else?
Yeah, if I might add something else real quick, I know you want to move on, but what just struck me also is his grace and mercy in verse 4, that even though they are murmuring and they are going through all these head trips here, in verse 4, it's amazing how even through all that, Yah says, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go and gather the portion every day, and I may test them. So they were being tested whether they will walk in my laws or not. So it's amazing how all this was a test.
Right. It's more. It's the word test is used here, but it's more proven. So it's more like he would prove those who were going to follow his law, statutes, and commandments based upon the circumstances they're faced. You know, much like what happened with Job, he's going to not necessarily test, but prove that he's going to follow his laws, statutes, and commands. So that's more the because it's an opportunity also for him to show his glory, as we're going to see going forth. But you know, verse 4 is loaded, and I want to come back to verse 4 because there's a lot more things there. But I want to let Brother Nathaniel go, and then we're going to walk back through a couple of these other verses because there's this we may not even get through all of 16. I'm looking at now because there's so much here. But let's just take our time and see all that Yah has to say to us. Brother Nathaniel.
You know, I was actually going to ask point something out and then ask a question, but since on the topic at hand, I have something to say. You know, I used to smoke cigarettes, and it's going to be related to it, so I'll share how it's related in a minute. But I used to smoke, and the thing for me, and you know, before I was in Torah, obviously, the thing for me is that I always used to be like, oh, it's okay because I can stop anytime I want, and that was actually true, and I proved it time and time again. That like, oh, I'd smoke and then I'd want to quit and then I'd quit and I'd stop for months, you know, sometimes, you know, a year or so, and then I'd start back up because I wanted to smoke again. And so I'd start and stop, you know, but then, you know, Yahuwah helped me finally get that off, and, you know, it's not good to, you know, impurify. But what I've learned is, as far as breaking a bad habit, is a lot of times, and this is what ties it into what we're talking about. A lot of times we romanticize the situation. So like, say we're in a bad relationship and then we break up, and then we always remember just the good times, you know. So they're in a bad relationship. They're slaves in Egypt. It's a bad relationship. Now they're apart from that, and now they're only looking at the good stuff. They got like that selective memory. They're only looking at that good stuff. And they're negating that all that negative things. So like and that's kind of what happens. Like you like I would quit smoking cigarettes, and oh man, like, oh, you know, you're trying to think of some of the positive, some of the addicting aspects of smoking cigarettes that you kind of like reminisce on, and I'm not going to go over, you know, any of them, but you get some of that positive stuff. And so what I learned to do is I wrote down on a list all the negative stuff of smoking cigarettes. So, you know, waking up and it feels like there's like spider webs in your lungs, walking up a set of stairs and you're wheezing, coughing junk out of there, you know, all the negative stuff of smoking cigarettes. So every time that I would have a craving, and I'd be like, oh man, I want to go have that cigarette. I would like, nope. I would like inject like in the you know, like allegory. I wouldn't actually inject. I would like insert, you know, the thought of all that negative things on the list. So I'd have this longing for the positive aspects of that relationship, and then I'd take all the negative things that I would have, and then I would insert that, and then eventually cigarettes, I would no longer think about the good times. I would associate every craving that I would have with all the bad times. And that's what they should have done, and that's what we can learn from, is that as they're leaving Mitzrayim, and you know, they're on their way out, and they're wanting the food or the comforts of knowing where your house is, and not, you know, being on the move all the time and things like that. They should have wrote a list of all the negative stuff that they had to go through, so that every time they go to start murmuring again and start complaining about something that they're longing for, like, wait, no, the positives that we're in now far outweigh the negatives that we were in, and then eventually you're going to mentally recondition yourself. That's kind of what I wanted to bring on that, and that's the lesson that we can learn today. So like, as soon as we start murmuring about, like what Brother Rod said, you know, about oh man, I used to like to go out to the bars and go have fun. Yeah, you're remembering the good times, but you know the hangovers, the all the money you're spending, all the negative stuff. You need to take a list. You need to write down all that negative. But the question that I wanted to ask was, I see here, you know, that it's the 15th day of the second Chodesh, the second new moon. Of all the moed that we have, there's only one moed to where you get a makeup day in case you were unclean to be able to participate in the Pesach, and that would happen on the 15th day of the second new moon on the second month. And I don't know how that's connected here. I just saw that. I was wondering if anyone else had looked into that and to see is this how does that relate? Because I don't necessarily believe in coincidences of why it would be the second new moon on the 15th day. 1 month anniversary of them leaving, which is also that makeup Passover that they have. I was wondering if anyone has seen. Is there a connection that I'm missing? Because I don't see it.
I think you're right on it. That is what they're doing here. If you didn't have that opportunity, the first one, now you got this opportunity 30 days later, second Pesach. If you were unclean or on a journey or something, and that's pretty much what was going on here. So, I think this is where it all is established. So these are the foundational aspects that we're looking at of all of this time. So this helps us in our journey as well to know, Good point, though. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I also think, though, too, it's by the way it's mentioned, it's also giving clarity as to the time frame in which, you start to hear the murmuring versus when they were delivered, in the short period of time in between, and how the mind forgets, like we've been talking about, how you forget the ugliness of sin. You only remember the beautiful part. You only remember that sin has a costume. So we remember that good picture. We don't remember what it looks like when the skin comes off and you see the ugliness under and how sin kills. We don't remember those things.
But that's also what the Pesach is too during this time, is for our, as we went through this, our self-examination to letting the sin get out of our homes, out of our lives. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing. I'm just
saying how that's tying back in as well at this murmuring and this type of thing. This is that second Passover to get that back out. You start recognizing, hey, we're starting to complain here. We're whining a bit. We're not, our faith and our amuna's shaking here a little bit. It brings us back into that focus again. Maybe that's the tie-in that Brother Nathaniel's looking at.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think we see that later play out as the law is given. But there is a focus on getting the mind right again, getting the focus right again here 1 month later. And that Yahuwah has to remind them of what He's done, and that they have no reason to murmur, that they have no reason to complain. So it all works in to exactly what we're talking about. So praise God for that. I wanted to look at verse 1 because they very, in this account, Exodus account, it just gives it says they journeyed from Elam, and all the congregation of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, that's not sin as in sinning or missing the mark. That's an outlying frontier city outside of Egypt, and some say it's an abbreviation. The wilderness of Sin would be the wilderness of Sinai, but it says between Elam and Sinai. So we don't have like a clear picture of where they journeyed. So Numbers chapter 33 actually gives the path that they went through. So I just wanted to read that since it's not mentioned here in Exodus. It says in Numbers 33, verse 10, it says, they moved from Elam and camped by the Red Sea. They moved from the Red Sea and camped in the wilderness of Sin. They journeyed from the wilderness of Sin and camped by Dophah or Dophka. They departed from Dophka and camped at Elish. They moved from Elish and camped at Rephidim, where there was no water for the people to drink. So there it gives a clear path of how they traveled and got where they are. So we see a clearer picture of the journey here. And Will brought up verse 4, which it says, "Then Yahuwah said to Moshe, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, bread from heaven for you." And that reminded me of John chapter 6. John chapter 6, verse 31 says, "Our fathers ate the manna in the desert, as it is written, He gave them bread from heaven to eat." Then Yahusha said to them, "Most assuredly I say to you, Moses did not give you the bread from heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread of heaven. For the bread of Elohim is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world." So we clearly see a direct reference to our Messiah in the bread of heaven, and we looked at 1 Corinthians 10 in the past, how it goes through the cloud and the manna and the rock, all being Yahusha. So good reference here to the bread, to them taking care, the Father taking care of the hunger of the Israelites. Reading further in verse 4, it says, "And the people shall go out and gather a certain quota every day, that I may test them." We talked about test, prove. It says in some manuscripts, whether they will walk in my law or not. And that reminded me of Deuteronomy, chapter 8, verse, I should have wrote these out. Deuteronomy 8, verse 3 says, "So he humbled you, allowed you to hunger, and fed you manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you know that man shall not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of Yahuwah." And we know that those are the same words that Yahushua quoted to Hasatan when he tempted him in the wilderness. And then Judges chapter 2, real quick, verse 20. "Then the anger of Yahuwah was hot against Israel, and he said, Because this nation has transgressed my covenant, which I commanded their fathers, and has not heeded my voice, I also will no longer drive out before them any of the nations which Joshua left when he died, so that through them I may test Israel, I may prove Israel whether they will keep the ways of Yahuwah to walk with them as their fathers kept them or not." So here there was detriment to them disobeying. Here he gave them grace and mercy with their murmuring, and eventually gives them food and birds and bread for their murmuring for hunger. So, complete difference in the way the Father looked at his children here. And I thought we should bring light to that as we looked at verse 4. because it was so packed. Anyone else? You see anything else there in these first 6 verses? What about verse 5? What do we see in verse 5? Oh, Nathaniel, go ahead.
Sorry, I don't have my headset on here right now. You can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna talk about how you get how people get. I'm trying to remember the scripture because you were. I was thinking about it as you were saying it, so I don't have the scripture pulled up. But how Yahuwah allows us to be turned over to the devices of our heart, you know, and so he allows us to basically fall under that temptation that we cultivated, and then that, because that's within the individual, then Yahuwah will take that, and then he will allow that to come to its fullness, so that his people can learn from that blemish that would be within us, so that we can recognize where the problem is, so that we can reach in within ourselves with Yahuwah's discernment and with his ruach, so that we can understand where that imperfection lies, so that we can pull that out, and it'll draws us out. You know, it's dross, you know, bubbles out of gold or silver that is being refined. We can see that dross within us. So I was just kind of gonna pull out that even though he doesn't, he entices no one. We entice ourselves, and then he allows that to come to its fullness. So it seems here that because he says, you know, in verse, let me find where that is. In verse 4, you know, in order to try them whether they walk in my torah or not. And so I see that that since they have this this food comfort that they have, which is, it puts yourself in the slavery mentality, food would be a level of comfort that would be maybe one of the only solaces that you have, maybe one of the only pleasures that you're able to get, because you know you have to eat in order to be able to be working hard, you know, in order to be slaved out. You have to have food in order to be strong, to be able to do these labor jobs. And so food is something that would be given. So I could see how maybe people have an attachment to food as they're coming out of slavery, and then looking back at the comforts that they did have amidst the chaotic situation. And here Yahuwah seems to be pointing that out, as that's an issue, that this comfort food that they have, and is pointing that issue out, not to beat them down with it, not to tempt them to get them to stumble and fall, but so that they recognize the problem, and us today, so that we see those of Yasharal in the past, that we see this and apply it in other aspects, so that we can look in the mirror and see where the imperfections are, so that we can recognize these attachments to the physical that we have, so that we don't put our relationship to Yahuwah and his commandments and what he's asked us and what we should want to do out of love over physical comforts that we would have, whatever that may be.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I also think though that it has a literal meaning to verse 4, because we look at verse 4 and it says, "Walk in my law or not," and then verse 5 he comes right behind that and he says, he gives them a command, "And it shall be on the 6th day that they shall prepare what they bring in, and it shall be twice as much as they gathered daily," right? And that is what, to respect the Shabbat. And we find out in a few verses that all of them didn't do that. But in Leviticus 25, it says this, and this is talking about provision for the 7th year. the year of Jubilee, it says, so you shall observe, verse 18, my statutes, keep my judgments and perform them, and you will dwell in the land in safety. Then the land will yield its fruit, and you will eat your fill and dwell in safety. Verse 20, and if you say, what shall I eat in the 7th year, since we shall not sow nor gather in our produce, then I will command my blessing on you in the 6th year, and it will bring forth produce enough for 3 years. Verse 22, and you shall sow in the 8th year and eat old produce. Obviously, it was preserved until the 9th year, until it comes in, you shall eat of the old harvest. So this is a direct example of what he's teaching them in principle that he provides for them. He gives them a day to collect and a day for them to rest, just as he gives the land a chance to rest in that 7th year. So we see a clear picture of him not only stating that he's going to try them, that he's going to test them, that he's going to prove them. He tells them what to do and then sees what they will do afterwards. So very good point. JP and then Brother Will.
No, I was just looking at that scripture in verse 4 as well, that whether they will walk in my law or not, my Torah. And that was just a pretty amazing verse, knowing that we don't get like the 10 commandments till chapter 20, so this is before that. So his instructions that were given to them and the way that they were, this is showing that his instructions, how they've been with them, they're embedded in them, like, so it's amazing. I just thought that was a beautiful thing. And so I just want to share that. I think it just goes to prove more and more of his Torah and his instructions and how they're so beautiful in you already. And we just got to walk them out, like I said. So, hallelujah.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's given them instructions all through, he's given them instructions since Genesis. He told them what that 7th day was going to be, so all of these things add into seeing, okay, are you going to obey these commands that I have given you? He lays out everything further as we get, into Exodus 20, but he's already given them laws, statutes, and commandments to follow. And he's testing or proving them at this point. And then also too, he's given an opportunity to show who he is, because don't forget that, as we talked about earlier, the whole point is to have our focus on him. The whole point is to have our trust in him, as we look at, what surrounds us. We talked about losing our focus. We talked about, Mecca brought out Peter, I'll use again, and that there were raging waters in front of him. He was a fisherman, so he knew the difference between nice, smooth waters to fish on and raging waters. There was something there that was real, but he has completely lost his focus and thought he was going to sink. Yahusha said, keep your eyes on me. Keep your focus on me. The things that you're thinking are not going to happen if you keep your eyes on me. And I think as they looked at their situation, they started to push forth this idea that my fate is here. I'm going to die. Y'all should have left us over in Egypt where we were slaves. It would have been better for us to die there. Can't you look, 2 million people. Can't you hear? What did that sound like? What did the murmuring sound like? All of them are coming at Moshe and Aaron with all of their crying and bickering and whining. Like, June and I, if we're doing something, our son's impatient. We're like, man, would you chill out? We got this. You know what I mean? Imagine what 2 million people sounded like to Aaron and Moshe. And they're like, look, We're not even leading this. Don't you see the cloud? Don't you see the pillar? That's what's telling us our next step. That's who we keep our focus on. So it's very important for us to make parallels to this in our lives, because this is where it gets real. It's not just reading the word. I mean, we can, I was going to say this later, but I'm going to say it now. Like, we can get blessed by the word, all day, just in the word, getting blessed by the testimony, excuse me, getting blessed by the testimonies and blessed by what the word is saying to you. And you have a beautiful Shabbat. And then at the end of Shabbat, husbands and wives, you get into an argument and the wife slams the door, and the husband stands out the door, and the woman says, "You get on my nerves." Bam, she slams the door, and you stand out and say, "Yeah, that's the fruit of the spirit." Slam the door and yell at your husband, and then you sit and you say, "Man, we were just sitting and enjoying Shabbat, and then this happened." We lost focus. We lost focus. You let Abimelech slide up in there. You let the enemy get up in there. You let the thoughts of what surrounded you get up in there, and you follow that. And that's why you are where you are. So we have to be mindful that these things are for our learning, that these situations are for our learning, and we are to take everything and apply it to our lives. It's not just a story. We got to look at these things and add it to our lives, because if we don't, we sink the moment we take our eyes off of our master, right? Just like Peter. Praise Yah. Brother Will, I see two of you. One hand's raised and one is a photo.
Yeah, because I got to use two because of the way I got everything set up.
Okay.
Where there's something interesting, a connection that I'm making here between verse 5 and verse 8, but I'm wondering if I should just wait till we get to that point before I bring it out.
Yeah, we're actually about to read the next 6 verses. So Sister Robbie's going to read that. Save your point for verse 8. That'll be perfect.
I think everyone will find this interesting. Picked up on this.
Between verse 5 and verse 8, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then verse 6, it says, "Then Moshe and Aaron said to all the children of Israel, at evening, you shall know that Yahuwah has brought you out of the land of Egypt." Exodus 6, verse 7 says, "I will take you as my people, and I will be your Elohim. Then you shall know that I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. Then you shall know that I am Yahuwah," I read that twice, "who brings you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians." So we have Yahuwah constantly repeating and reminding the Israelites who he is. It's like I talked earlier about, what I read today. Like, we're going to find out, like, there's a reason why he said, whatever you collect today, eat it. Don't save it for tomorrow. Because tomorrow it's going to what? It's going to stink, right? We're going to read that. And then he says, but on the Sabbath day, collect double, and what you have is not going to stink. And then he says later, he's going to say, put this in and put it up on the shelf, and it's going to last 40 years. Something miraculous is happening for the Israelites here. But I think what we also got to see is that the Father is taking the Israelites through these different steps so that they will remember what he's done aforetime, what he's done prior. So they have something to fulfill. He's always talking about memorials. He's always talking about, do this in remembrance of me. He wants us to be reminded constantly of what he's brought us from and what he's brought us through. So Praise you. I think I completed my thought. I got lost for a second. Go ahead, JP. It'll come back to me.
I just wanted to, there's something about preparation on verse 5 that is just, the preparation day, the way that we came to understand it is like really like gathering everything you need before the Shabbat, so that you don't have to go to the store and purchase anything, even the gas in your car and all these different things. And but I was thinking about it in a bigger spectrum of saying, I feel like, and I'm just wondering, this is where my question comes in. Is it safe to say, like, we're in preparation day, as in, like, because the millennium is the 7th day. The millennium is that time. It's like, I don't know. I'm trying to clue into that area.
This
so
epic of time is preparation.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. And it's amazing when I started thinking about that. And it's like, you're continuing to prepare now. You know what I mean? We're preparing. It's not just a 24-hour period no more. Now it becomes your life. Like all your life, you're just preparing. And of course, like scripture says, I'm examining myself daily and just continuing to seek myself to say, okay, well, are you repentant? Oh, all of a sudden something pops up and you're like, oh man, and you repent in that moment and just that cleansing. But just wanted to speak on that. I thought that was an interesting thought was happening right there. So just want to bring that up.
Nah, that's a beautiful picture of what we see, because we see references to the Shabbat. We see references to the year of Jubilee and the land resting. We don't talk about that a lot, but here we see that spoke out and spelled out clearly as we looked at the Leviticus passage. But let's keep reading. So Sister Robbie wanted to read from verse 7 to verse 12. Stop at 13. Oh, Sister Letty had a question.
Yes, Shalom. I just want to point out in verse 2, what stood out to me is when it spoke on the whole congregation murmuring against, Moses and Aaron. And so that kind of reminds me in Philippians chapter 2, in verse 14, it says, do all things without murmuring and disputing, that ye may be blameless and harmless, the sons of Yahuwah, without rebuke in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation, among whom ye shine as lights in the world. I think I just wanted to point that out because I think, like personally, as we go through struggles and obstacles in our personal life, sometimes, or we are wanting something, in our lives. Like for me, for instance, like right now during this time, I'm asking the Father, provide me, with a nice little piece of land, so we, so I don't have to be dependent on the things of this world. We cannot dependent on like, or be able to provide for myself, like have my own will. And so sometimes those things that, are things that I'm praying for, it takes longer, in my instance, it's been taking a little bit longer. And so, or if I'm going through some kind of health issue or something, I just feel like during those obstacles, during those times, it's always really important to just, again, like look back to the Father and just praise him and say, thank you, Father, for where you have me, because it's not like I have a home, I have a shelter, I have a roof, I have food, and it's really important during those times. And even if my prayers are taking a little bit longer to be answered, that's perfectly fine, because the Father, during those times, it's really important that I've come to learn is that I just have to thank him. And I just have to, the things that I have right now currently are the things that the Father wants in my life right now. And I just have to humble myself and say, thank you, Father, for what you have provided me with, And so, again, that whole murmuring against, here it says against Moses and Aaron, but in my case, in our cases, sometimes we do it and unintentionally to the Father, and always just thanking Him and being grateful for His provisions,
Absolutely. And I think you're right in the sense that, when they're murmuring, Aaron and Moshe are the subjects to which they are focusing their murmuring, but it's really, and we're going to see this later, how it's really to Yah. Yah is the one that they're complaining to. Yah is the one. And what's interesting about verse 2 is that word against literally means to stand above and speak down to. So they're placing themselves not above Yahuwah, not above Moshe and Aaron, but above Yah, saying, you should have left us in Egypt here, because you don't know what you're doing, because we're going to die out here. They're speaking down to, they're in an upward position, speaking downward. It's a downward aspect, that word against is used there. So much more is in that word against, as they spit this really vitriol. And that's why it's so much grace. Based upon the way they acted and what they said, they shouldn't have been fed anything. Right? They should have been chastised, maybe even punished even. But yet he gives them food, bread, and meat, right? So very, very good point to pull out in verse 2. I would have forgotten to go over that word against had you not brought it out. But, those things that we complain against, we're really complaining against the Father. And he sees it as such. He says as much as also. So great point, sis. Very, very good point. All right, read from verse 7 through verse 12. Stop at 13, Sister Robbie.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And it reads, and in the morning, then ye shall see at the glory of Yahuwah, for that he hears at your murmurings against Yahuwah. And what are we that ye murmur against us? And Moshe said, this shall be when Yahuwah shall give you in the evening flesh to eat, and in the morning bread to the full. For that Yahuwah hears your murmurings, which ye murmur against him. And what are we? If your murmurings are not against us, but against Yahuwah. And Moshe spoke unto Aaron, say unto all the assembly of the children of Yasharal, come near before Yahuwah, for he has heard your murmurings. And it came to pass, as Aaron spoke unto the whole assembly of the children of Yasharal, that they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of Yahuwah appeared in the cloud. And Yahuwah spoke unto Moshe, saying, I have heard at the murmurings of the children of Yasharal. Speak unto them, saying, at evening ye shall eat flesh, and in the morning ye shall be filled with bread, and ye shall know that I am Yahuwah Elohim. I think that's how do you pronounce that? I'm reading from the Sefer. What else?
Just
Elohim.
Elohim. Well, in the Sefer, it's pronounced, I don't have a Sefer, but it's Elohim. Okay. Sure. What do you want to bring out there?
Just basically that the children of Yasharal were complaining not just against Moshe and Aaron, but they were actually complaining and murmuring against Yahuwah. And Yahuwah was so gracious and long-suffering and merciful that he didn't punish them or even chastise them. He just says, I am going to, in verse 12, he says, I am going to give you flesh, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread. And so he's doing it for his namesake, for his glory, but still at the same time, he could have been very angry to, go ahead and feed them, but give them some kind of punishment for them murmuring against him after he was so, he's their deliverer. He just got them out of Egypt. He did all these wonderful miracles, and then they're going to sit up here and complain. But like what was mentioned earlier, it's human nature, for us to have selective memory and not remember the bad times and just focus on the good times. And just the fact that the Father is thinking like, okay, I'm setting things up. I want them to learn Torah. So I'm going to take their imperfections and how they're murmuring, but I'm going to set it up for my glory, because I've chosen these people to be my nation. Although they are not showing me appreciation and gratitude, I'm still going to prove through this nation and give them a chance to follow my Torah and set things up to go ahead and give them, food and everything, and see if they're going to keep my Torah. And I'm going to glorify myself and give them this flesh and this bread, but they better not try to work on my holy day, my set apart Sabbath day. So it's just interesting how the Father looks at the whole picture rather than just focusing on, okay, they're disrespecting me, they're not showing me appreciation, I'm just gonna smite them or give them some negative consequences. No, he says, okay, I'll feed you, and I'll show you my glory through this. And that's what I got out of it. Praise Yah.
No, sister, that was beautiful. I mean, you said a lot there, and I think, one of the things that we have to realize is that our Father, who made us, not only wants us to always know who he is, but he always wants us to know what he's done and what he can do. I like what you said first when you said he did it for his namesake. Yahuwah says, I change not. Look what he says in John, the Gospel of John, chapter 11, verse 4. This is Yahusha speaking. He says, when Yahusha heard that, he said, the sickness, speaking of Lazarus, is not unto death, but for the glory of Elohim, and that the Son of Elohim may be glorified through it. These opportunities are to show himself mighty. These opportunities are for his name's sake. He gets to show his glory. Jump down to verse 40 of chapter 11, same chapter, and he says, Yahusha said unto her, did I not say that if you would believe, you would see the glory of Elohim? So we see, those same things being echoed that are here in Exodus as Yah gets an opportunity to show himself, to show his glory through these occurrences, through these opportunities. The other thing you mentioned was, and what we talked about earlier was the fact that, they didn't receive condemnation. They didn't receive chastisement, but they were blessed. They were blessed with manna. They were blessed with quail, right, as we're going to talk about. And I think in Numbers, I think it's Numbers 14. Numbers 14, where it talks about the death sentence of the rebels. It says in verse 27, how long shall I bear with this evil congregation who complain against me? I have heard the complaints which the children of Israel make against me. Right? Now look at number 17, verse 5 says, and it shall be that the rod of the man whom I choose will blossom. Thus I will rid myself of the complaints of the children of Yasharal, which they make against you. So we see there is a different outcome that they could have possibly received, which will happen later. But Yahuwah gives them grace and he feeds their hunger here. And then in Numbers 16, verse 11, he says, therefore you and your company are gathered together against Yahuwah. And what is Aaron that you complain against him? So he forgoes and forepasses them thinking that they're speaking against Moshe and Aaron. No, you're speaking against me, you know. So just wanted to pull that out. You did a great job of explaining that, sis. Brother JP.
Just wondering about, because it says here that they behold the glory of Yahuwah appeared in the cloud. So at this point, I didn't know if Moses was in the mountain at that point, and just in that verse, and because it says that Aaron, it came to pass as Aaron spoke unto the whole congregation, and if Aaron was like in charge in a way and talking to them, Moses up there, and they look up to see the glory of Yahuwah in the cloud, and they just see this. I think the brother Jadiel had brought out the like, I think it said he brought out a word that it meant like what he looked like. The light of him was a certain description in color.
Shekinah glory?
No, it was like a rock or something. The brother Jadiel, he had said it
He's
yesterday.
on. Brother Jadiel's on.
Oh, he's hello. But yeah, but the color that he was speaking about, because we were talking about lightning and the lightning of him, and it was a certain color. What was that color, brother Jadiel, that you brought out about the lightning of Yahuwah? Like the color, it was like a brighter than white in a sense, you know. Let me see if he shares it.
Beryl. It said that they saw the beryl in the sky, which was the color of a stone, and they said it's the color of beryl, and they looked at that, the color of lightning, and they attributed that to seeing Yah.
And so that color was like so
where
bright.
Is that?
Where's that at, brother?
It was when they was eating at the bottom of Mount Sinai.
Okay.
When they were eating, they looked up and they said, "We saw Elohim."
Oh.
They looked up. They said that we saw Elohim because they saw the lightning, but Elohim told them not to stare lest they break through and really see him and die. You see, so they attributed seeing his power, the power of his presence, to seeing him. You know, that's what I was trying.
And I was just bringing that up because, you know, here it says that they behold the glory of Yahuwah appeared in the clouds. And like, so just imagining the people down on the lower part of the mountain and looking up in this cloud, and they're seeing this, if it's the same, you know, description of what we were speaking about, that barrel, that light, it's like a lightning bright, and just, I mean, they had to be in awe and fear as well, like a whoa, like, it was a powerful moment. I was thinking, you know, it's a powerful moment after they were murmuring, you know what I'm saying? Like they were just murmuring about, you know, it's like, and now they're getting, now the glory of Yahuwah is right in the cloud. Like there had to be this like, oh man, they're in some, you know, in a jam now. They got to figure, you know, and so they had to sit back and see what was going to happen, you know, because it seemed like if Moses was there and Aaron was here and the people were in front of Aaron, and so now they're kind of waiting on Moses to come back, and then they're going to get the instruction of what we got to. So it was just a visual I just want to share that I was getting when we were reading this. So it's so beautiful. Shalom.
Yeah, and I think you know, getting back to the idea of, you know, who they were murmuring against, you know, as because Yahuwah, you know, comforts them both. Because you see in verse 8 it says, also Moshe said, this shall be seen when Yahuwah gives you meat to eat in the evening, and in the morning bread to the full. For Yahuwah hears your complaints which you make against him. And what are we? Your complaints are not against us, but against Yahuwah. And we saw that same thing kind of take place with Samuel in 1 Samuel chapter 8, verse 7. You see that there is a rejection for Yahuwah being the king of the Israelites. It says, and Yahuwah said to Samuel, heed the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. You know, and it's always the focal point. Yahusha always reminded the disciples that they're not rejecting you when you go and you share the gospel. They're rejecting me. You know, and it's very easy to take, you know, our teaching, our sharing, our conversations personal, but we cannot, because we're speaking of him. And he comforts us in saying they're not rejecting you. They really have nothing against you. It's you that are being used. They see me, and that's who they're rejecting. And I think this is what's happening also with Aaron and Moshe from the Israelites. So what else we see there, Brother Will?
Yeah, bros. Bring up something I picked up on, and then I'm going to follow up with a question after this pertaining to something we've been going over Brother Jadiel's study. But in verse 8, when it says Moses, and now Lord shall give me to eat in the evening and in the morning. So that's telling me that it's covering two time frames there of the day, to eat to satisfy you. And then what I picked up earlier was in verse 5 when it said, it shall come to pass on the sixth day that they shall prepare that which they bring in, and it shall be twice as much as they gather daily. So it's almost as if in verse 5, Yah was on the sixth day prepare, bring, and it shall bring twice as much as they gather daily. And it's almost as if verse 5 was preparing them to feed them to cover the evening and the morning, like twice as much. I don't know if anyone picked up on that.
Well, twice as much is to cover the Sabbath day. So there wasn't going to be, so the quail comes at night, the manna, the bread comes in the morning, but it was twice as much so they will be covered for the Sabbath day, because there was going to be no bread to collect. There was going to be no quail to collect. So he gave them twice as much on the sixth day so that the seventh day they would have enough to last. Because remember, prior to that, it's going to be collect for the day. Don't hold anything over or it's going to spoil and stink. We're going to read that later. So here are the pre-constructions for what's going to actually happen.
Right. So it's to cover for both of those times there.
For the 6th day and for the 7th day. Yes.
Right. So I found that very interesting in verse 5, and I made that connection in verse 5 and verse 8. And the other question I want to throw out there is I know we've been hitting on this quite a bit during our Shabbat, especially during the Q&A. The importance of distinguishing between when it's speaking about the Father and it's speaking about the Son. So in these verses right here, each time it's mentioning, and now the Lord, and it keeps mentioning, is this the Messiah leading them, or is this Yah?
But when you see the cloud, when you see the pillar of cloud by day, the fire by night, when you see the manna, the bread of life, the living water, speaking of Yahusha, Yahushua, our Savior. So absolutely. And we're going to read some things later where you see this come to fruition, where it speaks of this time and speaks of Messiah.
Right. So this is actually the Messiah leading them throughout all this. Yahusha.
Well, the Messiah is leading them by the hand of the Father. It's not, he's not doing it of himself. It's Father's instructions. He uses Messiah to do it. Absolutely. So we see in verse 8, we see the rejection. The complaints are not against Moshe and Aaron, who were speaking to the people, but they are against Yahuwah. Then Moshe spoke to Aaron, verse 9, say to all the congregation of the children of Yasharal, come near before Yahuwah, for he has heard your complaints. And we talked about, the different challenges that were faced to the Israelites when they complained. Well, here in number 16, they're doing the same thing. And this is just showing you the mercy. So a lot of times we get grace and mercy mixed up. The mercy that's being shown to them here in Exodus chapter 16 versus those who disobeyed and murmured and complained and even took up rod, sword against Yahuwah. You see in Numbers chapter 16, there was a rebellion against Moshe and Aaron. Remember that? So you had the sons of Korah come up against Moshe and Aaron, and listen to what he says in verse 16. He says, and Moshe said to Korah, tomorrow you and all your company shall be present before Yahuwah, you and they, as well as Aaron. And then, as we know further on, the earth swallows them up. That is what they got for their murmuring. That is what they got for their fight, sword against, or rebellion against Yahuwah. So we talk about mercy and grace bestowed upon the Israelites here at this time, I think is an overstatement. What else do we see in these verses? It's a lot here. we see a parallel here. It says in verse 10, it says, now it came to pass as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation. Remember, he said, gather before the children, before Yahuwah says, spoke to the congregation of the children of Israel, and they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of Yahuwah appeared in the cloud. Numbers chapter 16, which we were just reading, verse 19, and Korah gathered all the congregation against them at the door of the tabernacle of the meeting. Then the glory of Yahuwah appeared to all the congregation. So we see a parallel in what's happening, but we see a difference in what was given. Here they're given grace and mercy, their hunger's fed, and in Numbers chapter 16, they get separated from the other tribes and are swallowed up by the earth. So mercy is shown here to the Israelites, as we can clearly see. JP.
Just the word manna. It's interesting the way that it's described in according to the Strong's. It says from H4100, but it says literally a whatness, so to speak. You know, i.e., or as an example, manna, so called, from the question about it. So I just want to bring that up because that was the first time I really looked at it as that, like, because of the way they seen it, was like, what is this? You know, they're probably quite, that was the question they probably gave themselves, like, what is this? So now they're getting fed, you know, he says, I'm going to feed you flesh in the evening, and in the morning you're going to have this bread that they're just like, what is this? You know, and then it's just this, it's an interesting situation, you know, as a people, you're looking and you analyze it and you picture yourself there and you're like, you're going to be getting this quail in the evening. So, you know, but in the morning you're getting something. It's something, but it's going to fill you. It's going to be there for you. So
yeah,
it's just very
it's amazing. It's amazing how you got to manna when it's not mentioned until what, verse 17? That's amazing. You saying true to yourself, brother. Jumping ahead. But nah, yeah, it's literally, manna means what or how even. It's like when they see it coming down, they're like, what is it? Or how is it? You know, that's the reaction to it. And that's what it's, the word ma, you know, is where we get manna from. So very good point. Little ahead of us, but it's true nonetheless.
but it's, you know, and it's amazing though too to say like how Yah really truly provides. You know, and after these, like we were kind of speaking right now, like after these people murmured and just in this situation, Yahuwah is still providing for them, and he's giving them this, because you know, having quail is a luxury. Actually, it's like that's a good meal right there. And then you get some bread. It's like there's no like, wow, like I don't know, like I guess that's what I was trying to like analyze it from, them murmuring and them still, then Yahuwah providing for them. And it's just this, wow, like that's all I can say is like, wow, that's so amazing. You know, it's just so amazing.
Well, you know what, since we're already talking about, why don't you read from verse 13 to verse 18, and then we can continue to discuss it, because there's a lot in there about the manna.
All right.
Yeah.
It says, and it came to pass that at evening the quails came up and covered the camp, and in the morning the dew lay round about the host. And when the dew that lay was gone up, behold, upon the face of the wilderness there lay a small round thing, as small as the hoarfrost on the ground. And when the children of Israel saw it, they said one to another, it is manna, for they wist not what it was. And Moses said unto them, this is the bread which Yahuwah hath given you to eat. This is the thing which Yahuwah hath commanded. Gather of it every man according to his eating, an omer for every man according to the number of your persons. Take you every man for them which are in his tents. And the children of Israel did so, and gathered some more, some less. And when they did meet it with an omer, he that gathered much had nothing over, and he that gathered little had no lack. They gathered every man according to his eating. It's very precise. You know, like, and that reminds me of like us today. You know, we should be eating, you know, like like Yahuwah is showing you here, he's saying get an omer per person. Like, you don't need to get more than that. Like, you don't need more than that. I'm showing you that that's all you're gonna need, because probably in this time they might, if he wouldn't have given that instruction, they would have probably filled up their basket, you know, like kept on going, like, oh, we need more. But Yahuwah is showing them, no, you need what I'm gonna tell you you need. You need this exact much. Follow the instruction, because I'm gonna provide. I'm gonna keep providing. Don't worry. Like, and so it just showed me in that way of, again, what I was speaking about, like, wow, like, it's so amazing how he provides. Like, even today, you know, when you got food and you're like, we don't gotta be all like you know, overdo it. Like, don't overdo it. Just, you know, like your parents might teach your children, like, eat so you're full. Don't, because then, you know, when you get full, you're like, man, I can't even move. So, you know, so I just want to bring that up. I think that's a beautiful teaching right
Yeah. So many things here. Yeah. I mean, I think he gives them exactly what they need. And we're gonna look at how he satisfies. When you really get into the makeup of what manna was. But in verse 13 it says, so it was that quails came up at evening and covered the camp. So, like, my thought was like, what does that look like? What do the quails coming up look like? And then in Numbers 11, it clearly says this. In chapter 11:31, it says, now a wind went out from Yahuwah, and it brought quail from the sea and left them fluttering near the camp. So they couldn't fly anymore, it sounds like. They're fluttering means, you know, they're in front of the camp, they're fluttering, they can't move. About a day's journey on this side and about a day's journey on the other side, all around the camp. So a day's journey worth of quail, a day's journey all the way around the camp, and about 2 cubits above the surface of ground. So it's not just all around laying, they're just laying there flapping and quivering. They can't go anywhere, but it's also 2 cubits high. This is how much quail it is, right? And the people stayed up all that day, all night, and all the next day, and gathered the quail. Ehud gathered least 10 homers, and they spread them out for themselves all around the camp. But while the meat was still between their teeth, before it was chewed, the wrath of Yahuwah was aroused against the people, and Yahuwah struck the people with a very great plague. So here it's describing a picture of them getting quail later on, after the mention of the 70 elders. But I read that so we would get a picture of what it possibly looked like when they saw the quail for the first time. Obviously, this is speaking of a different time. But wow, you know, you're given all of this, and you murmured to get it, and you still got it. You know, it's like a kid whining for something, and instead of us punishing them, we give them what they wanted, but then we give them a lecture also. Like, you should be fortunate. Do you know how many kids don't have, you know, thus and so? We all said that, right? But just a picture of Yahuwah's mercy and grace. here. June, you had your hand up?
Yes, but I'll wait because I realized my comment had to do with we didn't get to where they uh, gathered twice as more on the. Did we cover that yet? That's coming up, right?
Yeah, well, we just read from verse 12 to 18. What verse are you talking about? 22? We didn't get to that yet.
Okay, I'll wait.
All right. What else we see here in these verses? It says, verse 14, and when the layer of dew lifted thereon, the surface of the wilderness was a small round substance as fine as frost on the ground. I think Numbers gives us a picture of manna too here. Chapter 11, verse 7 says, now the manna was like coriander seed, verse 7, and its color like the color of bdellium. The people went around and gathered it, ground it on millstones, or beat it in the mortar, cooked it in pans, and made cakes of it. And its taste was like the taste of pastry prepared with oil. You know, man, you know what I mean? He gave them pastry from the sky, you know. I don't know. I read these verses, these passages, and I'm just baffled. And this came from the sky. This is, you can't explain this, you know. I know that some scholars try to say that this came from a tree, and it was actually sap. That's why it's spoiled, because the ants came and ate it, and that's why there were bugs in it. No, it says that the sky cracked open and something came out of the sky and it tastes like honey. You know what I mean? So come on, this is supernatural. This is not something that can be explained by the human mind. You know, and as JP said in verse 15, it says, so when the children of Israel saw it, they said to one another, what is it? For they did not know what it was. And that's what manna is. What or how? What is it? What do we see? And Moshe said to them, this is the bread which Yahuwah has given you to eat. And an omer is it's 1/10 of an ephah. An ephah is about 20 quarts. So 1/10 would be 2 quarts or 6 pints. So this is what they gathered for each person. An omer for each person according to the number of persons. Let every man take for those for who are in his tent. Verse 17, the children of Israel did so and gathered some more, some less. And we talked about manna and what it meant. Let's look at Psalm chapter 78. Psalm 78, verse 23. Here we go. Yet he commanded the clouds above and opened the doors of heaven. Verse 24, had rained down manna on them to eat and given them the bread of heaven. Men ate angels' food. He sent them food to the full. So he sent them angels' food cake. Man, I'm just going. I don't see anybody's hands raised. Verse 18, so when they measured it by omers, he who gathered much had nothing left, and he who gathered little had no lack. And we talked about this because this was specifically speaking to they had exactly what they needed, right? Nothing more, nothing less. They didn't overeat, engorge themselves. They also did not starve. They didn't want for anything for what they gathered. So we looked at earlier, he gave them exactly what they needed. 2 Corinthians 8:15 says this, as it was written, he who gathered much had nothing left over, and he who gathered little had no lack. So, man, what is the full picture of what we look at, as we see this manna? It's such a beautiful picture. But let's read on. Let's who wants to read from verse 19 to verse 30? JP just read. June, go ahead.
You said 19 to 30?
Yes.
And Moshe said, let no one leave any of it until morning. And they did not listen to Moshe. So some of them left part of it until morning. And it bred worms and stink. And Moshe was wroth with them. And they gathered in every morning, each one according to his need. And when the sun became hot, it melted. And it came to be on the 6th day that they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each one. And all the rulers of the congregation came and told Moshe. And he said to them, this is what Yahuwah has said. Tomorrow is a rest, a Sabbath set apart to Yahuwah. That which you bake, and that which you cook, and lay up for yourselves all that is left over to keep it until morning. And they laid it up till morning as Moshe commanded, and it did not stink, and no worm was in it. And when Moshe said, eat it today, for today is Sabbath to Yahuwah, today you do not find it in the field. Gather it 6 days, but on the 7th day, which is the Sabbath, there is none. And it came to be that some of the people went out on the 7th day to gather, like knuckleheads, but they found none. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, how long shall you refuse to guard my commands and my torah? See, because Yahuwah has given you the Sabbath, therefore he is giving you the bread for 2 days on the 6th day. Let each one stay in his place. Do not let anyone go out of his place on the 7th day. So the people rested on the 7th day.
What do you see there?
Not a lot has changed. We're still knuckleheads. But on a serious note, I'm just sitting here marveling, as JP was mentioning about the Father's provision here. you know, just how perfect of a provision it was. You know, like, I mean, it's a heavenly provision. Like it had the wonder of Yah's power all in it. I mean, he even equipped the food that he's supplying them with to honor his law. You know, in terms of how if they left any overnight, it turned into worms and it stink, except for that 6th day where they told them to gather twice as much. I mean, he, even in his provision, he provides them to uphold the law and has this, you know, perfect heavenly food that he provided. I mean, the fact that it would melt at certain times, and I mean, this is just some wonder stuff, wonder bread. Um, you know, whatever it was, I mean, it was, you know, but yet, you know, here they are, you know, today when we have Yah's trees, his clouds, and a sister was sharing yesterday, how can you not see the hand of Yah? And here they had something in addition to that that was so miraculous. And even all the miracles that they had just seen in Mizraim, you know, to get them out of there. And, you know, it just seemed they were bent on, I don't know, not following along.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, your point, you know, to how some went out even after he said, you know, that is likened to the very fact that he said, you know, I will see, I will test, I will prove whether you will follow my commandments. He gave them a direct commandment to follow, you know. So, but it just kind of led me to what I'm seeing in this whole picture. I'm gonna read a couple passages, then I'll kind of speak to it. But I read earlier passages out of John chapter 6, and I'll read it again. Verse 30, it says, therefore they said to him, this is a disciple speaking to Yahshua, what sign will you perform then, that we may see it and believe you? What work will you do? Our fathers ate the manna in the desert, as it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. Verse 32, then Yahushua said to them, most assuredly, I say to you, Moses did not give you the bread from heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of Elohim is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world, the living world. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, it says, moreover, brethren, I do not want you to be unaware that our fathers were under the cloud. All passed through the sea. All were baptized into Moshe in the cloud and in the sea. All ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink. For they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them. And that rock was Yahusha, our Messiah, Brother Will still on. But with most of them, Elohim was not well pleased, for their bodies were scattered in the wilderness. Now these things became our examples to the intent that we should not lust after evil things as they also lusted. And do not become idolaters as were some of them. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Nor let us commit sexual immorality as some of them did. And in one day 20,000 fell. Nor let us tempt Messiah as some of them also tempted and were destroyed by serpents. Nor complain as some of them also complained and were destroyed by the destroyer. Now all these things happened to them as examples, and they were written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. Therefore, let him who thinks he stands, take heed lest he fall. No temptation taken to you, such as is common to man. But Elohim is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with temptation will also make the way of escape that you may bear it. So what does that say to me? It says, that this manna, this picture of this manna is twofold. Because one, it's the living word we see in Yahusha Messiah, but it's also the written word. Do we gather more than we need, or do we allow the newness of his word to refresh us daily? Do I read today and expect for it to last all week? If I read today, if I study today and not tomorrow and not Tuesday, Monday and not Tuesday, Wednesday, will my life start to stink? Will I start to see things imperfectly? These things are for us to see. These instructions are for us to follow physically, spiritually. There's a physical aspect and there's a spiritual aspect. We are to be fed his living word daily, so let us keep these things in mind as we read through these passages and understand that they have more meaning than just the physical. They also have a physical meaning. As that bread started to stink, as it started to get worms, so our life does. If I'm not reading on a daily basis, I start to wither and falter and fall away from where I should be. I don't deal with every situation the right way. I don't talk to every person the right way. I don't deal with situations on the job, at home, with my wife and kids, with my neighbors. Is my perception off? Am I dealing with things from a carnal sense, rather than depending on what I just read out of Proverbs? Am I being wise with those words, or are those words so far from my mind because I haven't eaten them daily? I'm trying to still eat off of what was given to me on Shabbat, and it's starting to get sour. It's starting to stink even, so we got to be mindful of the reality of what these things mean to our walk in our daily lives, so JP.
Just going back to the glory and them seeing, the cloud, and they seen this, like what we were speaking about earlier, and they still didn't follow the instructions correctly. Right. It's like you see the actual cloud of Yahuwah, and you're like, this is, how, and so it was just kind of something you're like, wow, like, I mean, and I guess, I was looking at, I don't know why, but I was thinking about the time when, with Thomas in John chapter 20, verse 27, then he said to Thomas, reach hither thy finger and behold my hands, and reach hither thy hand and thrust it into my side, and be not faithless but believing. And then he goes on to tell him in 29, Thomas, because thou hast seen me, thou hast believed. Blessed are they that have not seen and yet have believed. So I don't know, I was just thinking about that for some reason, but I guess I was thinking because with Thomas in this situation, he gets to see, like, literally see Messiah with the holes and everything, and he's like, you're believing because you. So it kind of made me think about these people, like at the time, I'm like, man, they should have been believing because they got to see, and again, like, we're over here now in 2020 and I'm believing, but I haven't seen. I didn't see that cloud. You know what I mean? To be really. Now I know that there were people. I know that they were, human, where they had to. It was just a something that was, we can't even put ourselves there and say, oh, if I were there, I would have believed. You know what I mean? We can't even do that. But I think that I was just taking that same scripture and just saying, praise Yahuwah. I just, as I see it and I believe it, I'm saying, wow, like, I'm taking it for what I read and what he shows in the scriptures. So
I would venture to say, though, no, you haven't seen Messiah in his physical appearance, but you know what he's done in your life. You're not still John from the barrio. You know what I mean? You have changed. You know, there's some changes in your life that do not emulate anything that you used to be, what you used to think. That's a miracle. You know, the fact that you lead your family to understand and see the same things you see in scripture, now that your wife sees them, now that your kids see it, now that your brother-in-law sees them, your mother, your father, you know, people are starting to see your friends. You know, you talk about your friends in prison that you speak with, you know, they see him through you, you know, so there is a true blessing in what Yahuwah promised. Blessed are those that have not seen and believe. And we all fit that category. But there are things that we can see, you know, that are clear pictures that fit how he operates, you know, in our lives. So we not only have history, we not only have his word, we have the things that he's done in our life that we have physically seen, the things we prayed for. You know, the fact that we pray and he listens to us, that we see those prayers answered, you know, that we were blind, you know, spiritually, and now we see spiritually. So all of these things come to my mind. And it just also reminded me of what I was talking about earlier with, you know, every morning he would bring more manna down. You know, every morning, every evening he would bring more. And, you know, June brought out that, you know, if they didn't gather it, it didn't stay, the sun melted it. So that means they had to get out there early to get it, because at a certain point in that day, if it wasn't gathered, the sun melted it. You know, what is the sun melting in our lives? You know, are we up, you know, physically in the morning, getting prepared for the day, getting our written manna for the day? You know, because the busyness of the day can swallow up whatever you think you have spiritually. And all of us know that, you know. It doesn't take but one person to cross you off in traffic, you know, before you lose your mind and start saying unholy things spewing out of your mouth, you know. Person to say something to you the wrong way, you know. You know, we're quick, you know what I mean? Like, you know, quick, you know, in the street, you know, that's an attribute. That's a good thing, to be quick with the trigger, you know, quick with the hands, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Throw it out there. But you have to be mindful of the things that you are responding to, and ask yourself, should I even be responding to this? Or is this something that we should let roll off our back? You know, like Teflon, you know. So we have the opportunity to have a fresh word from him every morning, but we don't, because we think we got it. You know, I studied 2 weeks ago. I got in deep. You know what I mean? So I'm cool for another month. Yeah, okay. Come around me in a month and see how spiritual I am. You know what I mean? Or better question, see how spiritual I'm not. You know what I mean? So we have direction. We have instruction to be filled with manna daily. And on the Sabbath, get the double portion. Get the morning session in and get the afternoon session in too. Get a double portion. You know, well, that would have been yesterday, but you know what I mean? But you know what I mean. Sister Diane, this is good. This is good, y'all.
Shalom,
Shalom,
brothers
sis.
and sisters. My mishpaka, what a beautiful lesson this is. Exodus is just captivating. There are so many lessons and so many beautiful nuggets and gems in there. You know, I was listening to Deacon JP speak of how could those Israelites not be full of power and strength and faith and hope, seeing the wonders and experiencing the wonders of the Most High. You know, Yah's there, his son is there, they're doing all of these things. And then he goes and he Deacon, you go and you witness that with his son over there in John, and with Thomas, and then he says, because you have seen me, this is John 29, he says, because you have seen me, you believe. But then what did he say after that? Baruch are those that have not seen and yet have believed. So we are blessed because we are believers that have not seen. And I feel that this is something that we can grab a hold to in our walk, in times of our weakness, in times when, well, I'm like me, I'm not feeling very strong today. So actually, Deacon JP, I thank you for bringing that out, because what you just spoke just encouraged me. It just gave me strength. I feel better just hearing that, those few words you spoke. And it caused me to actually go and look at that verse, because when you said that, it just came to me. He said, yeah, well, what? He said, well, yeah, well, if you see me, and you believe, and that's Thomas he's talking about, like those Israelites saw more of Yah than that. Of course he had the wound in his hand and whatnot, and he was actually able to tell, but there were so many miracles that was given to those stiff necks, and they only believed for a while. As soon as trial came, or they got hungry, or anything, any little thing that went against their grain, it took them out of their comfort zone, any little thing, they started murmuring. And they were still blessed. So I just wanted to say that. And we don't see him physically. I put it like that. We see him in so many other ways. And we feel him. We feel his presence. We feel his glory. We feel his touch. But we don't see a physical Yahusha walking around. So thank you for that. That's really encouraging to read that we are blessed. Blessed are those. That's that's in my Bible. That's written in red. So that's almost like a gift. It's a gift, because he has decreed. It's almost like a decree. That's the word. Blessed are those who do not see me and yet believe. Amen.
Praise Yah. Absolutely, sis. There's so many things that we can get from this. And I agree with everything you said. JP brought out a great understanding there. And we have to ask ourselves that question, because this applies to our walk, right? But there's 6 verses left. You know what? We'll pick up in verse 31 next week. We'll stop there. We'll pick up in verse 31, because there's more to discuss there. But great study. So much to gain from this passage, as we are the Israelites. So this definitely, this was something. I'm sure we all got something great, got a principle, got something we should do as we look to learn and be nourished by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of Yah, not just some, every. Praise Yah. So this concludes today's study. We'll pick up in Exodus chapter 16, verse 31 next week. Praise Yah.
Shalom, Akuti, and Brohim. Thank you so much for viewing this video. We hope it was helpful to your walk in the truth. Remember to always search the scriptures on your own, to study Abba's word and show yourself approved, according to 2 Timothy 2:15. We invite you to study with us. To join us in a live study, just go to our website at assemblyofyahuah.com and click the Join Us tab. We have something available Wednesday through Saturday of every week. If you've been Baruch or blessed by this video today or any other study, we encourage you to go to the Giving tab on our website. Our elders all have their own ways of income, so none of the giving or proceeds go to them. Instead, it goes to biblical assembly needs. We also encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you don't miss any new videos. We sincerely pray that Abba continues to direct your path as you acknowledge Him in all your ways. Much avaha and again shalom.